Howdy.
Good morning.
You've had a fun morning this morning.
Uh-oh.
Well, I mean, not being facetious, it was kind of fun. I'm sitting here getting things ready to start, and I hear we have a toad in the house. So, the toad, of course, hops underneath the cart and back behind the file cabinet, and
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm walking downstairs and I see motion. I said, "Oh man, a mouse!" And I looked and I went, "Oh, mice don't hop."
He'll eat some bugs. You can get a mister. Just mist him now and then. It'll be fine.
I just wonder how it got in. I'm figuring it came down the stairs. Just like the time we found the rabbit in the house. You were little, but so you probably wouldn't remember. But Teresa Bismack had stopped by to pick up Brian when Dad was watching all the kids, and we were sitting and talking, and Teresa said, "You have a rabbit, you know?" And I said, "Oh yeah, there's a clutch of them out in the backyard." She said, "No, under your couch." She's looking at me, and under the couch under me is a rabbit. How a rabbit sneaks in the door, and it's a little bit bigger than a toad, a little harder to find that way.
We do have a quick question from Karen about lavender and butterfly bush still not showing any signs of life. Shouldn't there be a little green by now? I have 3 teeny sprigs on my buddleia, Karen, like so small they're almost not seeable. So I'm also awaiting more signs of life. Janet, what do you think? How concerned should we be?
The butterfly bushes are very late. Some of them that we've noticed, some especially near buildings, that are actually fluffed out a bit.
Yep.
We were at Michigan State this week, and theirs are barely starting at the base.
Barely.
Some of them seem to be hurt. That happens some winters, but we're seeing life on most of them. Lavender, depending on ours is doing wonderfully. We cut it way back like we usually do in April, and it's fluffing out all over. So is the sage. But depending on the local climate and what went on, almost anything can happen to woody evergreens.
Especially Mediterranean woody evergreens.
Yeah. And it may not be the spring that killed them. It may be last December that killed them, and being exposed and warm when they weren't supposed to be warm. Yeah, but if you don't see any signs at all, I would say, if the butterfly bush, if I don't see signs of life on the butterfly bush by now, I'm usually poking around at ground level to see if I see any buds coming, because I'm not going to wait forever. And if I scratch it down near the surface and I'm not getting green moist tissue underneath the bark, I'm not going to butterfly bush. We stuck some cuttings of butterfly bush last fall, particularly attractive, as in butterfly attractive.
Yeah.
Butterfly bush.
It's a nice bush too, but there's other butterfly bush right nearby, and this is the one that gets all the butterflies.
So we took a bunch of branches from it and stuck them in the ground last fall, and I expected about half of them to sprout, and it looks like maybe 2 of them are going to. So I would say that it wasn't your best
year
for butterfly bushes.
It looks like maybe Bob has a follow-up. Bob, you got your hand up?
Oh, hey, good morning, everybody.
Morning, Bob.
A separate topic, just a shout out for the mulch calculator on the Garden A to Z website. I've used it 3 times now, and most recently 9 yards of delivered mulch for a friend of mine. We helped out, and that calculator is spot on, and it does convert into bags equivalent for those that like to do that approach. But this was about 130 bags converted of mulch, but we just had a big pile delivered onto the driveway. Anyway, it's a great tool on the website, and I just wanted to promote that for anybody who hasn't used the mulch calculator. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for finding it and saying that, Bob. Yeah, it was in response to a terrible story that we heard from a client who had someone estimate mulch for her, and maybe deliberately estimate way more mulch than they needed to have. And what do you do with all of that? We said, so I'm glad that it works, because we need to keep people from being in that position of buying 10 yards more mulch than they need, because they don't realize how much mulch is.
When the mulch pile is right, though, you always worry that you don't have enough when you start, and then you're getting near the end, and you begin to worry that maybe you have too much, and then you get closer
Other
and
way,
you go,
at the beginning,
"Oh,
at
it's
the
good."
beginning, you say, oh man, this is too much.
No.
Halfway through, you say,
Oh, yes,
uh-oh, may
that's
not
right.
be enough.
I got it reversed,
Yeah.
as usual.
Hey. Right on. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have dropped that link in the chat, and I just did a test. If you go to Garden A to Z and search and just put calculator, it is the first thing that comes up. So that's an easy
that
find.
Search does work sometimes. For those who are new, and there may be some people here who have not been here with us before, you can ask questions too, and this is your chance to warm up and try that. You can either ask them aloud by using the raise your hand control, or you can type them into chat, and one of us will see them and make sure that we answer them. And you can save the chat. Sometimes there's some good information in there already. There are several links in there. One is to an article about flathead worms, which are another invasive species that's working its way around the country and has been for quite a while. And it's one of those slow news day items that sometimes comes up and gets a lot of scary press when it probably doesn't deserve such scary press. Today we have a short outline. That's pretty complete, but it's only for our main topic, which is the way we work when we're in between our first of the month talks here during the busy season. We have quite a few topics to tell you about today, but the main one that we wanted to make sure we gave you notes about is about replacing losses and filling gaps. Did get some questions during the week. Therese sent this picture of a poor, I can't remember if she called it an abused rose, but she said, I soaked it good in water and I've got it in the ground. What else can I do for it? And I said, soaking is a good thing to have done for it. Get it moist because it has very little root on it. But also with that much top wood to support, not just physically support, but that wood, if it is still alive, is using energy. And the only energy it can get is from leaves, which in this case are not there, are not functional. So in that case, when you have something hurt that badly, cut it way back, cut it back so that when it sprouts out, it's only supporting the base wood and whatever sprouted.
Is that a leaf sprout right there?
Yes.
If there is a sprout, cut back to that.
Yeah, you can cut back to there. You can also make a little terrarium for it. You can put it in a place where it's not going to cook underneath a plastic cover,
That
Stephen.
somebody knocked off.
I didn't knock it off. I took it off on purpose, and Steve put it back over and cooked my little whatever it was that I was rooting in there.
If you take it off, you shouldn't have left it out there. I thought the wind or the chipmunk or the red squirrel or the dogs.
Oh,
might
I
not
promised
go.
I promised my friends who have the yoga gnomes that I would tell their story. We were remarking on how the magnolias did not frost burn this year, and they looked at each other and Donald goes, yeah, I tried to protect them from the frost and didn't take the bags off, and he cooked his magnolia blooms. So the only year the magnolias did wonderfully, and he boiled them, poached them.
Yes.
That is a first. I've never heard of somebody bagging up their magnolia bloom.
I covered a cutting that I'd made, a very small cutting. I covered it with a Tupperware plastic for the winter time, put a little gravel around it to hold it down. And then I uncovered it while Stephen was standing right there with me and said, oh, look, here's what I put under here.
And then you put it back.
I set it down next to it. Anyway, when you have something that needs to conserve moisture because it doesn't have enough root to take up moisture itself, you can build it a tent, but you have to do that in a shaded place. You need some shade cloth over it, or you would do it under an awning somewhere and keep it moist and watch for condensation on the inside of the shelter you build it to make sure that that's where it's getting water. We also heard from someone who is working on a holly, and Anne, I can tell you that holly is exactly in the condition that this holly was when I got started with it. And you can see all I've taken out in the little picture here. Go to Garden A to Z and look for Holy Moly. If you look for Holy Moly, that article about holly will come up, because that one is going to take some time to recover from being sheared and getting its growth only at the tips.
Yeah.
Are there other questions?
There's a hand up.
There actually are lots of questions. Nancy, do you want to go ahead with your hand up? And I've got the others organized.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, Janet, Stephen, and Sonia. It's nice to start the morning with you again and start the morning laughing.
Thank
It
you.
always is nice.
The saga of the little Japanese maple that we planted essentially bare root because we washed off all the soil and took out some girdling roots continues. As I said, the leaves wilted. We continued watering it. We misted it, but the leaves are just drying and becoming crispy, and in some cases browning. So at this point, do we just continue watering and explaining to the neighbors why we planted a dead tree?
Dead tree, yes, yeah.
Sorry.
Or
that
what?
happened too,
Yeah,
but
I am sorry to hear that happen. It does happen sometime, and it
especially if
could,
it was a.
and it could well,
freshly
it
leafed
could
out.
well leaf out again. But what you need to do is now not overwater it. So
Ah,
check to make sure that, because it's only going to use as much water as it can take up through its leaves and work through evapotranspiration. So check the soil before you water. If it's cool, and that means it's moist, and let it be.
Okay.
Just wait. Usually it takes about 3 weeks or so for a tree to leaf back out again. We have a little tree in our backyard, a sweet gum, that did that
Mhm.
last year, and it did the reverse. Its response to shock was to not drop its leaves. It didn't. Dropping leaves is a living process, and it didn't
Mhm.
finish that process. And it is now leafing back out, but it had to make new buds. It couldn't use the buds that it set last year.
It didn't, yeah, and we were concerned
So
about
still give it some time.
okay, so we do have to wait for the old leaves to drop off before there's any hope of new coming
Not-
out.
No. You don't
Oh.
have to wait for them to drop. They may or may not drop, because it is a living process to drop. And if that portion of the, well, at any rate, no, you don't have to wait for them to drop.
Okay, thank you.
good luck.
Thank
We
you.
actually have quite a few questions lined up to start. Do you want to hold them for in our gardens, or do you want to keep going with them now?
Let's hold them for in our gardens so that we can do our introduction anyway, and we'll just stop for questions after each of our little segments.
Okay, everyone, I've got them ready to go.
Little red horse chestnut, Baptisia coming up to bloom.
That wasn't the Baptisia, was it?
Yeah, that's Baptisia.
Oh, yeah, that's the Baptisia, sorry. I got it mixed up with something else
Well,
again.
once we get figured out what we're looking at on the screen,
Yeah.
we can get started here.